Okay, class, today we will talk about Mother Russia, the beginnings of the Russian Empire with the beginning foundations of the church and the Tsars and what they gained from the Byzantine Empire. We'll try to keep in the Russian accent for throughout video. Okay, so in its early years, Russia was peopled by a number of ethnic groups, different languages from all their territories, shifted from century to century. What emerged as a general pattern that you had Slavs from the east, Finns from the north, and Turkic tribes in the south. They had forest dwellers, they had nomads from the steppes, farmers of all various ecological zones traded with each other. You have a long distance caravan route linking Russia to the Silk Roads. All other significant groups include the Varangians, the relatives of the Vikings, who were active traders on the rivers and northern coasts. And then you had the Khazar Turks farther to the south, who built a trading kingdom at the mouth of the Volga River where it enters into the Caspian Sea. Okay, the Rus were societies of Western Slav farmers ruled by their Varangian or Viking nobles, and their most important cities were Kiev, which is the capital of modern-day Ukraine, and Novgorod, which is located in modern-day Belarus. Both of these are centers of trade. Okay, the first Russian state was established in the 800s. The early Russian state was centered on the city of Kiev. In present-day Ukraine, it really wasn't Russian, it was Ukrainian. Kiev's location on the Dnieper River made it accessible to Byzantine traders because the Dnieper feeds into the Black Sea, so the Byzantine traders could simply sail across from Constantinople up the Dnieper to Kiev. 980, Vladimir I becomes Grand Prince of Kiev. He chooses Orthodox Christianity as the religion of his state and initiated the culture of the Byzantine, or imitated the culture of the Byzantine Empire, building churches. He adopts the Cyrillic alphabet, the Byzantine alphabet, and orients his trade towards Byzantine markets. This was very easy, obviously, because the water routes all led towards the Byzantine markets. Byzantine missionaries and traders make frequent contacts with Vladimir's officials via the Dnieper. When Vladimir decides that the Orthodox Church would be the official state religion, he orders that he and his subjects be baptized en masse in the freezing Dnieper River. The Dnieper never gets very warm. Remember, Russia is very, very far to the north. You're talking Canadian climate at its warmest. So it's a cold place, and this river's freezing, and mass baptism of people in this river. This is a huge example of cultural diffusion. Russia is basically almost the entire early Russian culture is diffused from the Byzantines. Okay, Kievan food output is not real good. Poor soil is part of the problem, but the other part of the problem is it's cold in Russia and there isn't a very long growing season, so it's very difficult to grow anything there. You couple that with some primitive technology, they have to rely on trade to get food, among other things, and they can't really rely on agriculture. During this early period, Kiev and Novgorod had populations between 30 and 50,000. These are cities the size of Auburn, Oswego, Fulton. Okay, Christianity gradually spreads in the Kievan state. Pagan customs and polygamy remain until the end of the 1100s. Russia is farther behind their European and Muslim neighbors. Orthodox Church gradually becomes more powerful as church officials also double as tax collectors for the state, and they build the authority of the church within the state. Throughout its history, the church, even during the communist period, the Orthodox Church kind of was almost like a sister government to the government of Russia. Okay, Russian Eastern and Eastern Europe became a crossroads from Europe to the Byzantine Empire during the Middle Ages and the Renaissance. You can see where Kiev is in location to the Byzantine Empire here. Novgorod, closer to Moscow, but has its access to the Baltic Sea and all the other states of Eastern Europe. Here's Italy down here, not very far away. This is Germany here. So again, you can see where it was in location to everything else. And here's the Khanate of the Golden Horde, the fourth of the Mongol Khanates. Okay, Byzantines influenced Russia in a number of ways. We've already talked about them. Biggest one is the written language, and the written language still stays there today. Okay, they gave Russia written language. Byzantine missionaries adapted Greek, which the Byzantines used, into to translate the Bible into the Slavic languages that are used in Eastern Europe and in Russia, and they called it Cyrillic after the Cyril, the monk, who was kind of the driver of this project. Eventually, he becomes a saint, and there's cathedrals all over Russia named after Saint Cyril. It's still used today in other Russian and in many of the Eastern European countries. I know Serbia uses it, Bulgaria uses it. That's why when you see these guys at the Olympics and stuff like that, and you read their jerseys, it doesn't say Russia on the front. It looks like it's got a whole bunch of different letters. It's because it's written in the Cyrillic alphabet, which is much more like the Greek alphabet than the Latin alphabet that we use. Okay, Orthodox Christianity, like I said, is a huge piece of Russian culture. Byzantine missionaries bring the Eastern Orthodox Church to Russia. The Russian Orthodox Church becomes an important part of the state government. Hallmark of Russian government from the 900s to the present is autocratic government. Rule by one becomes the norm of Russian government. The Tsar, the rule of Russia, is the Russian word for Caesar. Art and architectures, Russians adopt the religious art, the music, the architecture of the Byzantines. Byzantine domes become very popular in Russia. This is St. Cyril's Church in Moscow, in Red Square. Probably the most famous church in the Eastern Orthodox religion. Okay, and it's very much, very, very similar to some of the churches you will see in modern-day Istanbul that are still there, that are holdovers from the Byzantine times. Okay, major religious differences with Western Europe and Eastern Europe and Russia caused these areas to fall behind during the Renaissance. Modernization comes very slowly to Russia. Some of it's because of poor communication networks. Some of it's because of the Mongol domination that keeps them turned towards Asia for quite some time. But eventually, they do start to pull out of it under Peter the Great, who we will be getting to towards the end of the year. We're going to stop before we get to him today. 1480, Russian princes called the Dukes of Muscovy drive out the Mongols out of Russia. This is the beginning of modern Russia. These rulers take the title of Tsar or Caesar. The first of these is Ivan III. He drove the Mongols out in 1490, and he makes Moscow his capital, and he's known as Ivan the Great. He is the first Tsar of all the Russias. So a little bit on Ivan. He believed that Mongols' power had weakened, so he stops paying taxes. And eventually he drives them out. He earns the title of the Great because he builds beautiful churches. He is the guy who builds the original version of the Kremlin, which is the center of Russian government. It was the center of the government for the Soviet Union, and it was the center of the government for all the czars for many years until Peter moves the capital to St. Petersburg on the Baltic coast. After the fall of the Byzantines, Ivan sees himself as the defender of the Eastern Orthodox Church, and again he calls himself Tsar because the Byzantine Caesar is no longer there, and he considers himself a descendant, so he takes that title and Russianizes it into Tsar. Okay, that brings us to Ivan the Terrible. And he wasn't called terrible because he was a bad ruler. He was a great ruler. But he was called the terrible because he was ruthless and he was savage with his treatment of his subjects. He thought he needed to revolutionize Russia, to change Russia. So he establishes new social institutions. One of them is feudalism. Okay, he brings feudalism in even though it's gone in Europe. Okay, before Ivan, the boyars or the nobles had control of their own land. Ivan takes away the nobles' land at will, and he gives it to nobles who help him in wars, and he sets up a feudal system similar to Europe's. He installs serfdom. As the nobles become less free, so do the peasants. Traditionally, peasants had been allowed to move around. Under Ivan, that all goes away. Some settled in the lands to the south and east, and they became known as Kazakhs, and eventually formed their own country known as Kazakhstan, which is around today. Eventually they're reconquered by Russia, and they live under the Russians for quite a long time and are really a subjugated race. To prevent escapes, the Tsar makes all the peasants serfs. They're obligated to serve a lord for life, and this change in social status is contradictory to the history to most of Europe, where serfs are already getting their freedom. Okay, this is Ivan the Terrible, and you can see the growth of the state of Muscovy into Russia, from the dark color out to the lighter colors. Okay, Mongol rule, again, has a great impact. They ruled Russia for 250 years. The absolute power ruled by the Mongol empires is copied by the Russian rulers, and they expect to rule without interference from everybody else. It also isolates Russia from the rest of Western Europe, and this cuts them off from many of the advancements that are made during the Renaissance that come very, very late to Russia. Eastern Europe has sort of a similar trajectory. Okay, it has always been an area of migration, foreign conquest, and war. Regions home to a very diverse mixture of people. They often fight amongst each other. They definitely fight from others, but it has created a greatly enriched culture. Eastern Europe has a lot of flat plains in the north, rocky Balkan Peninsula in the south, and this contributes to the diversity, both by isolating people in the mountainous areas, but creating an invasion and a migration route along the flat plains of the north. You have different people living there. You have Western Slavs who settle in the present-day Czech Republic, Poland, and the Slovak. You have the Southern Slavs and the Balkans. You have waves of Vikings, Germanic people, Huns, Avars, Bulgars, Khazars, and Magyars all come along across that invasion route as well. Christianity and Islam have huge influences there. You will see in Eastern European towns, Eastern Orthodox churches, Roman Catholic churches, and Muslim mosques, all built throughout there. Okay, when the Jews are forced out of Western Europe, they move to Eastern Europe, often due to things like the Black Death and other things. Jews are persecuted. Polish kings welcomed many of these Jews, and Poland becomes an enclave of Judaism, and that will have a huge impact during World War II. Okay, so just to give you a little map of the migrations of the Jews, they were forced out. That is where the blue is and where they went to from that. And then gradually after they were expelled from Western Europe, they moved into enclaves all throughout Poland, Eastern Germany, and the rest of Eastern Europe and into Russia. Okay, during the Middle Ages, a whole bunch of small kingdoms existed in Eastern Europe. Gradually they're absorbed into other communities through marriages and things like that. Poland and Lithuania, the power goes back and forth, and it is the Polish king Sobieski who breaks the Ottoman siege of Vienna in the 18th century, and Poland eventually will fall to its ambitious neighbors and disappear from the map until the end of World War I. Okay, the Magyars came from the Asian steppes into what is modern-day Hungary. During the Middle Ages, they ruled a whole swath of Eastern Europe. Like the Slavs in Poland, they adopt Roman Catholicism. The Hungarian king is forced to sign a papal bull. Like King John of England, he's forced to recognize the rights of nobles, and it strictly limits his power. The Ottoman Turks end this Hungarian rule in the 1520s. The Serbs also set up a kingdom, and they too are eventually conquered by the Turks, and you have a whole Islamization of a lot of the territory of Eastern Europe. Okay, so submit the Google form quiz, and that will be the end of this kind of mini unit.